Does that mean... Okay, I have to, like, go away from this plotline for a second and go back to Angel's original plotline. If Angel's power is actually that people start believing what he is saying, does that mean that Dr. Ivermine was only the evil sorcerer type because Angel believed in it so much?
Possibly. Is Angel a space orc? Is that what he is? It's just like whatever he thinks is going to happen will happen.
Because it kind of feels like that.
Man, as far as superpowers go, that's pretty powerful. Or stand abilities or whatever.
Why does he have to have such an active imagination? Couldn't he just imagine that, like, bullets were daisies or something? Why does it have to be evil sorcerers in the end of the world and demons and shit? Like, who hurt him?
They went over that. It's because he's the weird exchange student who just spends all his time reading manga.
Oh god. See?
Yeah. And apparently he is a symbolization or like an avatar of like a Japanese character archetype called, I think it's called a chuni, which is like the stereotypical sort of outsider school kid thing who's all into the whole manga and fighting against evil and demons and whatnot.
And that is a character archetype in manga.
Yeah.
Of people negatively portraying people who read too much manga.
Well, there are several versions of that. You have the otaku, which is the stereotypization of the obsessive fanboy. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely, like, very heavily featured in mangas and stuff, where, like, you have the main character, like, is either a self-professed otaku or other people call him an otaku, and it's very much a derogatory term. It's, like, not...
But doesn't that provoke some sort of reaction in the reader? Like, hey, are they talking about me?
They definitely are. But that's why you've seen like the emergence of one of the most sort of famous sort of settings and tropes for writing manga, which is the so-called Isekai.
The what?
An Isekai.
Uh-huh.
It is a very classic, at this point, manga story, which is the hero dies in the real world, and as a result wakes up in a different world where he still has all his knowledge and retains all his information from when he was alive, but now he's like in some sort of fantasy world instead. And usually it's like, so it's like kind of like Narnia, or I don't know, we have the Swedish the Brothers Lionheart, the Astrid Lindgren stories, the same thing, where you just die and then you wake up in a fantasy world, except in this world it's like, oh, you wake up in like the RPG world of your favorite RPG, so you know all the rules of the game, and you can min-max yourself and like turn yourself into like a level 99 paladin or whatever and stuff. And usually the main character in real life is like a loner and an otaku and just like a social outcast, and then when he gets transported into the Isekai world, he can leverage his extensive knowledge of video games into becoming a superhero. So this is so much like sort of, oh yeah, we write this so that these nerds can have a character to identify with themselves with, and like sort of like
and
it becomes a self-insert
sort of like power fantasies.
Yeah, and most of this is like written by otakus for otakus. Which is obvious, so you can imagine like how women are typically portrayed in these stories.
Oh yeah, no, I can imagine. And
they live solely to serve the hero with sex, and everyone loves him and everyone wants him. This is actually, it's quite funny. You know that that meme template or that image of Hayao Miyazaki being quoted as saying anime was a mistake. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah, anime was a mistake. It's all trash. That's not actually what he said. Mm-hmm. It's a misquote. Mm-hmm. What he did say, and the real quote is that he's talking about the degradation of writing in anime and manga. And you have to remember that Miyazaki, his prime motivation for like writing is that he wanted to write stories for like his
daughters.
I think grandchildren, maybe.
Or grandchildren.
I think it might be grandchildren, but anyway, for just little girls, and he wanted to write stories for them, stories that they would sort of identify with, which is why he like tends to use female protagonists, tend to use children, and tends to have very sort of realistic and sort of grounded reactions from everyone, and like it's just real people and real relations, and everything is believable, everything is relatable. And he's like, that's not how manga and anime is written today. These characters are basically written by people who don't spend time with other people in the real world. These are characters written by loners who just sit in basements and just... The quote was like, he's like, it doesn't matter if you can draw this way or if you can imagine all of these fantastical scenarios. If you can't create a character that a reader can look at and think, yeah, that could happen. Yeah, that's a character could be that way. Yeah, I could see that being like a real character. And he's like, and they can't do that because the writers of manga today, they don't interact with other people. They hate interacting with other people. They want to avoid other people in any way they can and just hide inside their fantasy worlds instead. So he's like, you have people written by people who know nothing about other people. And that was his argument, whereas like the writers today, they're all otakus writing for other otakus, and that's why there are no believable characters in manga and anime anymore, and why women are sort of devolved to being like cock-worshipping sluts who have no agency of their own, and men are just losers who are still just inserted into the role of being the savior hero. And
like, yet you are surprised that I don't like most anime or manga.
Obviously this doesn't apply to everything, but it does apply to a lot of manga.
I like the things that...
And here's the thing, is like, I don't even think that the manga fan base of today that exists, I don't even think they're gonna deny it. Because, like, just... Okay, here's the thing. At least in the Western world, like... being into anime has always been sort of a dweeb thing, right? But it's changed. The culture around it has changed. It used to be that when you were into anime and stuff, back in the day, in the 90s and stuff, no one knew who the fuck it was. It was like, oh, that's the weird kid who's into like this sort of Japanese? Why is it watching Japanese cartoons? That's fucking weird. Just watch Disney like a normal kid.
That's
like,
not true. I watched Sailor Moon as a kid already, and I was
Sailor
a kid
Moon,
in the 90s.
But so. Sailor Moon was a front runner, right? That was one of, like, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball, were kind of like the first sort of things that became popular in the West.
It wasn't a thing in our house, but I remember I had one friend who watched Sailor Moon religiously, and I watched it every time I was at her place. It was obviously very confusing because I saw one episode about every 2 months, but you know...
Yeah.
But I
never liked Sailor Moon.
7 or so at the time, so that was early 90s. That was around.
But today, you're a loser if you like anime and manga for a different reason. Back then it was because it's different, it's weird, it's not part of our culture, we don't understand it. That's not the case anymore. Today, manga and anime is mainstream. Today, like, fucking everyone knows what it is, and it's super popular. Today, you're a loser if you like anime because the writing has degraded to the point where it's like, oh, you're into creep shit.
Yeah.
That's your thing, right? Yeah. You're that guy who's into creep shit. You read all that stuff with all of the incest and all of the tentacle fucking and all of the violence porn and whatnot. And then you sit there as a manga and anime fan, and you're like, yeah, you're not wrong. I want to say like there's more to it than that, but then it's like I'm also gonna acknowledge that there is that is a part of it, And
Look, there's pearls among the turds. You just have to like wade through all of the turds.
No. That's not at all. You don't wade through the turds. No, you learn how to enjoy eating shit.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you can't wade through it. That's not feasible.
No. Okay.
You just have to
worse.
Enjoy it. Yeah.
No, I can't.
Get into it.
Like, I can't enjoy shittily written things. We've been over this. I like my shitty romance novels and whatnot, but I have a couple of standards that apply to them. So when I read my weird Victorian era trash romance novels, I don't read all of them. I read the ones that are historically incredibly inaccurate in that they have very feminist heroines whose motivation in life is to be like on their own 2 feet and like not be whatever. No, but you can't otherwise. If the like the more they try to be like historically accurate, the more it looks like you're reading the kind of like weird power fantasy. It's like, I will submit to this person. Like, no, I can't. I'm sorry.
Anna's way into like these young adult romance novels and like, softcore teen smut, but with very little smut. But there is sometimes smut.
Yeah.
You have to accept it. Just like you have to accept the incest in the manga.
No, actually, no, that's not true. You're mixing 2 things up. I like romance novels
and
that
young
have
adult
characters,
yeah.
and young adult science fiction and fantasy novels, and those I prefer to be clean because I think it's kind of creepy to read about teenagers having sex. Like, I'm too far away from that age.
You are clearly not a reader of manga in that case.
Yes. So it's like, those are 2 separate things.
But here's the thing why you have to accept it in Japanese thing. When we talked about this way back when we played Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
The idea of like how youth is portrayed in Japan. Mm-hmm. Where since everything is sort of like written for teenagers and whatnot, but they have this obsession that like the characters have to be sort of like kids or teenagers too.
I hate it.
Which is why I was surprised when I found out that like Cloud in Final Fantasy VII is actually supposed to be like 21 years old or something.
But that's like, still super young. Like,
that's
to me at this
fucking
point.
Ancient by like Japanese manga standards. It's like, take any protagonist and like, 15. 15 and it's gonna save the world.
Yeah.
See, that's why I kind of like the exceptions. Yeah, Cloud is 21, that's cool. Sid, who's supposed to be the cranky, crotchety old fart, he's like 32 or something. Like, he's younger than I am.
Oh my god, he's younger than us.
Yeah, I think Sid's supposed to be like 32. And then you have the flip side of it, which is stuff like Evangelion, where the main character is like a little kid who's supposed to become the mech pilot and supposed to save the world. And he's like, I'm a child. I cannot possibly do this. And like, people dislike that character because he's immature and he's not responsible and he's like a coward and shies away from all of this big responsibility. And other people are just like, well, yes, because he's written like correctly. This is what would happen if you take like a 14-year-old kid, put him in a battle mech and say like, it's now your responsibility to save everything. It's like, no, he can't do it because he's a kid. It's like Spider-Man Homecoming, where it's like, yeah, it's like he's not ready for this sort of responsibility.
Yeah. No, I find that annoying. It's like that I'm sometimes a little saddened by this because, like, you know, science fiction and fantasy is something that people of all ages enjoy, and like lots of people like us that really grew up with that and computer games, it's like, it's probably okay to market something towards us as a target audience as well. Does it always have to cater to the tweens and the kids?
Yeah, it's the same as with YouTube, right? Why they had to do all of this these new rules that you have to designate things as like for kids content, because everyone always wants to suck on that kid money titty.
Yeah,
it was like, yes, there's so much more money. There is so much more money in the marketing stuff to kids. It's not even comparable. You and me, like, we are not the target demographic for fucking anything anymore.
I want to be the target demographic for something, goddammit. And I don't want it to be daytime television. I'm not that old yet.
Well, we become the targets. It's like when we get kids. And then
we get the target audience for kids stuff. I
No,
want stuff
like-
for me. For me.
It's over. It's over. We have become
We will
culturally irrelevant.
No, we will start becoming a target audience again once we reach geriatric age.
Oh, that's true. They need to sell diapers to kids and the elderly.
No. There's lots of stuff targeted at old people, like television-wise, and like it just because, you know, old people, they don't know about the internet so good, and they just give their credit card information away for shit. So we will become the target audience for scammers once we get old enough. But like, you know, fun stuff.
Well, if you want to be the center of attention again, there's only one thing to do. You just gotta jump in front of that Isekai truck.
That what?
It's
What's
the
that
most
again?
It's the most common way of starting the Isekai story. Like, you have to die to
Oh, that was it. I was like, I remember that word from earlier, but I don't remember.
You get hit by a truck. It's so common that you can probably even go to TV tropes right now, and I bet there's gonna be a trope page for the Isekai truck.
Oh god. Yeah.
They even wrote a manga about that. They wrote a manga about a guy who is the Isekai truck driver. Who's like a serial killer. And he's just got in his head that he's saving all of these lonely losers by hitting them with the Isekai truck and sending them to a fantasy world where they can become heroes.
Okay. That sounds like an episode of Criminal Minds. Gone weird.
Yeah.
Okay. We have gotten so off topic.
All right. Should we dive back into this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. Whew.
What were they talking about? Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yes. Come on, Higure, let's go back to the gym, okay? No! Stop! Do not throw me out like some wretched doll!
Doll.
Doll?
I suspect he has suffered from megalomania since birth.
Most likely. Megalomania? Whatever do you mean?
Delusions of grandeur. I know how to pronounce this word, okay? I'm just trying to figure out how to say it wrong.
Etchwing.
Eschewing.
Eschewing.
Societal standards. He lives his life in the midst of some bizarre fantasy. Perhaps it is genetic.
Always with the Nazi ideology.
Yeah.
But there would be no helping it then, would there?
Well, to be fair, there is like a genetic component to schizophrenia.
Yeah, I know.
He is unusually active in the destruction of his surroundings, especially given his physique.
He is very tiny.
Internal prejudice is a terrible thing, I suppose. He is no doubt exerting to the limits of his capacity at all times.
Oh my.
The most dangerous part is his ability to bring his surroundings into his fantasy. So I seem to be less affected than you. And since also I invited him to the school, I have yet to find a use for him. The whole thing has been nothing but a waste of time.
Well, he invited him because of his delusions and how he can suck other people into his delusions. That makes him an interesting test subject.
Yeah.
Basically.
Okay.
Did you say something just now, Doctor?
Nothing at all.